Start with a few technical things, after which I will leave the floor to Gianfranco Marrone, who is the, let's say, inventor of this project, the mastermind behind Cucota, and he will say some words on the project. I will start with prosaic issues. One of our colleagues from Palermo couldn't come, and he found out only yesterday before they departed. So there are some small changes in the program.
I would like to thank Christian Bankov and the New Bulgarian University for having chosen this issue of food as the topic of this 10th edition of Early Fall School of Semiotics, and in particular the topic about the ways to teach culture and communication of taste in high schools. The New Bulgarian University with the University of Palermo and Kaunas University have together an Erasmus project called the Cucota, Culture, Communication, Taste. And this conference is one of the most important moments of this project. So thank you, Christian, for organizing all this in an excellent way. My speech today will try to explain the implicit preliminaries of this collective research work on food education. As you are noticing, my English is not very perfect, and so I apologize in advance for mistreating this language so badly. We live in a world ruled by specialists. We are all experts in something very small and very specific, hyper competent in some field whose surface area gradually reduce in favor of other subjects that know and do better than us. At work, we produce one single thing. In our free time, we consume numerous others. Sometimes we are asked to give our opinion as citizens. Everything else is handled by specialists, to whom we delegate the vast majority of course that we could handle ourselves. The doctor deals with health, the shrink deals with the soul, the food industry takes care of our meals, film industries deal with entertainment, and personal trainer deal with our body. Not to mention the number of phone apps that handle so many things on our behalf. But the expert, as José Ortega y Gasset said, is a learned ignorant, a now dominant figure in the great arenas of economics and politics, and in those much smaller settings of our daily experience. So we can see the figure of the amateur emerging once more. A figure that was so very popular in the European salons of the 18th century and ridiculed by the Romantic poets who viewed the amateur in opposition with the genius, dismissing him as a pathetic double painter. Now, the genius, apart from the odd media myth, has pretty much disappeared, and the amateur has once more taken on a positive character in the opposition of the excessive power of the specialists. The amateur is someone who, knowing nothing in particular, knows something about everything, including how to move from one field to the next, from one expertise to another. The amateur, dilettante, dabbler, you can use the word you prefer, is out of place. He is unknowing because he constantly translates, creating access and opportunities, spying new paths without losing a sense of things as they are. So I think that the culture of taste, in any sense of this word, is, or maybe it should be, a neutralization of the opposition between specialist and amateur, where neutralization is the category of structural linguistics. Let me try to explain this point. after a lot of years of that we can call gastromania, nowadays the food in the media discourse is totally out of fashion. Paying a price is the food, glorified by a mass mythology that abandons that which I would like to call this truth, or rather is political value. But paying the price is also the discourse about food, not only the social discourse present in the media, but also the academic discourse about food. In other words, I think that the end of the fashion of food has serious consequences also as regards to the scientific discourse on food, on cooking, on the table rituals, and so on. So this conference has a very important role. On the one hand, the problem is to relaunching food studies thanks to the fundamental contributions of semiotics. On the other hand, more specifically, another question is to opening food studies to the world of school. The Cucota project was born with the aim of spreading the culture and communication of taste at the higher institutes where professions related to food and cooking are taught. So, the age of post-gastromania has come. The lights on the stages of the kitchen and the dining table are out. The media binge of star chefs has come to an end. The rhetoric of variously mystical naturalism has shrunk back down to sight. And the moment has come to rediscover the truth of food. This would mean returning to that which is really on the table, where really means for us as semioticians the result of a semiotic transformation of raw materials and their creative combination, as well as significant fragments of history, society, culture, politics, and ethnic identities. Gastromania seemed interested in what was be found on the plate or what happened directly after this. On the other hand, the lives stories of producers, the mythology of chefs, and on the other hand, testing rituals, critical debates, and so on. Nowadays, I think that the moment has come to focus on dish itself, on the several truths of gastronomic experience. As in the dish itself, there are always two levels. The one of expression, the signifier, and the other one of content, the meaning. Truth is a very big word, I know, and I am using it on purpose here in a way that involves provocative and perplexity. What is certain is that media silence around food, the logical consequence of the fashion of recent years, projects us into an age in which the post are sure raison d'être. So our problem nowadays is the real truth of gastromania. On the one hand, as sociologists teach us when they talk about the trickle-down effect, fashions dry up by following a steady stream all the way to the bottom. Hence the replication of gastromaniacal stereotypes in cheap bars in the provinces, actuated by mounting a number of parodies in both the mainstream media and online. On the other hand, we can all start to relax and deal with the real issue, food and gastronomy in all of its forms, including those of the fashions and counter-fashions that accompany it. Fashion, for the semiotician, is an object to analyze. So, we attempt to and offer, and above all, to follow through research, critical reflection, raw social practices, and our daily lives, a number of tactics with which to resist the general decline of interest in food, in cooking, in taste, and in shared social time at the table. A decalogue here might be useful as a map, with which to guide ourselves through the present and the near future. Two little remarks before starting. First, this map will expose a list of problems, those that, in my opinion, are today more important for food studies from the semiotic point of view. Some of these questions will therefore be taken up in some of the next speeches in this conference, especially the speeches that will expose some chapters of the next Cucota manual. Second, my speech will be not very semiotic. Semiotics will remain implicit, indirect. It will be a discourse closer to cultural studies, which expose some aspects of the contemporary pop culture. Therefore, it may happen that problems of cultural differences arise between, for example, Italy and Bulgaria or other European countries. If it happens, I hope that in the discussion there will be interventions that indicate these possible differences. So the Decalogue. 1. We begin by remembering that the media is not always wrong by default, nor it's always right, and generalization, though effective, are woeful. We laugh at cookery programs on television today, perhaps we did in the past too, but must we still point out that they are not all the same? Documentaries, docu-fictions, news, fictions, game shows, reality shows, and so on, and that among their many positive effects is that of bringing people, in particular the younger generations, into the kitchen a little more often, distracting them from less edifying pastimes. Food bloggers may still be plodding on today, talking about their grandmother's various cake, but they were certainly responsible of having increasing the culinary discourse beyond the confines of a simple specialism, opening up new paths in food criticism. Those who take delight on filling out a TripAdvisor review displays an happy dilettantism, that whereas on the one hand it checks the average quality of the offering, on the other it contributes to expanding our knowledge of what will arrive in our stomachs. Gastromania may have its faults in expression and auto-representation, but it has certainly shaken up of the ice age of taste that the society of mass consumption and the food industry have imposed. This all in the same food, pour fuel for the body as machine, dedicated to being as efficient as possible, has been substituted by a way of eating that is synonymous with euphoria, conviviality, difference, memory, care on oneself, sensory pleasure, and daily management of the silent corporeal knowledge. 2. Talking on grandmothers, we will have to do without them for a while. On YouTube, there are hundreds of videos of women over the age of 80 making fresh pasta with their trembling hands in front of confused grandchildren carrying video cameras. In deluding themselves that they are rendering eternal the extraordinary culinary ability of their relatives, they treat them like fairground attractions. These poor old women are now legend. I read yesterday in Facebook that in a restaurant in Staten Island there are no chefs but only grandmothers. We find them in the online memories of Michelin-starred chefs, in the training novels of vintners, in all the bloggers' cake recipes, in the tourist brochure of the most hard-to-reach places, and in a myriad manifestation of the imagination that sees typicity as an untouchable, golden path to be glorified, rather than seeing it as a regular model for the future. There will never tire of repeating this tradition is simply an invention that worked, And that, as the historian have taught us, there are no typical dishes that are not the result of hybridization and translations. The local food purists may fight globalization, but he soon became the most ardent defenders of a shoddy ethnocentrism that, we can be certain, would have not been appreciated by their dear ancestors. 3. And what about the food that is called natural, organic, ecological friendly, and whatever you can call it? Once more, we are well aware where this meta-brand comes from, as a response to the artificially promoted by the frozen and tinned food, industrial prepared meals and TV dinners that are ready after just 20 seconds in a microwave. The reclamation of some authenticities was opportune, but we must be aware of what all of these has led to. A series of new brands that have competed with those we have just mentioned, which are most likely also industrially produced, but with the arrogance of speaking in the name of a supposed eternal nature. A nature that is once imperious and evanescent, like something out of a Disney cartoon. The rhetoric of organic, some aspects of which are untouchable, hides a regressive ideology, scientific naturalism. A serious ecologist, as well aware, imagine the kind of nature we want, certainly means imagining the kind of society we want. 4. This brings us to another subject, that of health, diet, nutrition, food. Generally, the media discourse reduces the issue of food down of medical, or if you prefer, physiological problem. Generally, of course, there are a lot of things found in supermarkets, bars, vending machines, offices, schools, and service stations that are bad for us. They cause us to put on weight, they provoke all kinds of ailments and illness, they can kill. But we must never forget this, and a little care is necessary. But real gastronomy begins when all of this is known, considered, avoided, and even forgotten. Dietetics, as the ancient Greeks said, is not part of medicine, but the medicine of the citizens in good health, who are lucky enough to have something else to think about. Those who deal with politics, ethics, aesthetics, know how to administrate the relationship between the pleasure of the body, including sexuality, and the needs of the collective. Dietetics does not abolish, but it organizes. It does not forbid, but it regulates. It does not arrange for sacrifice, but brings discipline to our possibilities. So, those who view diets as a simple question of health, or even beauty, they are actually replicating the ideology of efficiencies. For this kind of biopower, our body is only a machine, useful for the society of production and consumptions. Being healthy, for what reason? Do we want to live like we are sick in order to die healthy? No, thank you. 5. We live in a time when the word we find most satisfying when it comes to food is free. Gluten-free, fat-free, free from added sugars, lactose-free, yes-free, sulfite-free, free from palm oil, and so on. With the justification of health, or more precisely diet, usually the slimming one, removing is as reassuring as adding, is considered dangerous. ask anyone who works in a marketing for large distribution chains, and they will confirm that the best-selling food today are those that are free from, without any reason, physically or otherwise, for being so other than a psychological or symbolic one. There are fewer celiac than consumers of gluten-free foods. We could therefore propose an alternative. No problem, it's just 1 minute. We could therefore propose an alternative to the dilemma caused by adding and removing. Why not respecting and maintaining? Sometimes a minimal amount of common sense goes to a long way, with life experience of things that happen. As such, another issue to consider is that of testing, of rather little test. In Italian is assaggino, a gesture that has replaced the meal and even the dish in pop gastromania. There is a kind of reluctance to give into such a gastronomic experience a sort of shame of fullness and complexity, of normality, of standard gastronomy. Don't eat, instead speak, nibble, make yourself look like an expert critic, showing a honest refusal of any behavior that might hint to a never-ending binge or a vulgar gluttony. We are all aware that there are many cuisines in which the mouthful is the norm. Just think of tapas or sushi. But in the last years, we have observed a determination to destroy the gastronomic text. That combination of ritual and grocery that constitute a single unit of a dietary sense. Repackaging them as a varied and incoherent fragments, resorting to definitions such as finger food or nibbles. It could be said that the same thing is happening at the table as had happened in the late modern era in the arts and in the media, in which the textual unity, narrative for example, is broken into 1,000 streams that have no coherent relationship with one another. A lot of critics and philosophers has called this artistic way postmodern. In gastronomy also, the fragment takes the place of the whole. But there is one significant difference. If in the arts, this was claiming as a knowing poetry, and in the media, it was practiced as a communicative strategy, at the dining table, the whole is denied as a principle in order to be re-signified of another level, that of healthism, of presumed good taste. In other words, the little taster, the assaggino, is not a textual form taking the place of another, that of the dish or a meal, but it refuses in generally the pleasure of the gastronomic text. If it is true, let's stay seated around the table, maybe using cutlery, and eat a meal that is not a sum total of mouthfuls, but a structure of meaning. 7. If conviviality is one of the gastronomic qualities, Brillat-Savarin was unable to keep the two things separate. Culinary activity is no less important. Not so much, nor exclusively that of the great cooks, now opinion leaders, but the culinary activity that is ordinary, normal, daily. Too often we speak about food in terms of local products or agricultural techniques, of prime materials and way of procuring them, rather than in terms of what is the most anthropologically relevant activity in the world of food. I mean cooking, as the art of transforming substances and contrasting ingredients, flavors, smells, textures, temperatures, and so on. No one eats the raw materials, only their culinary valorization. Nowadays, we assist to a very big glorification of the raw. which goes hand in hand with the pardon, with the organic food mentioned above, but the role does not in any way exclude culinary activity. Anyway, the act of cooking is one thing that sets the human race apart from other living species, a structurally and transformationally activity that, by giving taste to human, gives meaning of the world. 8. It has been demonstrated that today cooking is no longer an activity of necessary daily sustenance, an activity that requires the interruption of anything one might be doing in order to sit down and eat lunch and dinner. Today, we could hypothetically even abolish kitchens from our homes, and no one would die of hunger. Cooking today is no longer a daily duty, a domestic chore that oppressed the female gender for millennia. It has become the occupation of merry amateurs, freed from its duties, and as such aimed at other targets and values, such as socialization, as respect of environment, the existential and ethical identity of our own times, of that of others. The amateur amuses themselves, but if cooking, it does so enacting one of the gestures that is anthropologically most rich in meaning from the human species, the passage from nature to culture. Not only having fun, but bringing pleasure to others who are almost always people they love. Cooking is a transitive act, but it is most of all transformative. It modifies raw materials, it resets social relationships, improving with humor carries it out. Amusing oneself in the kitchen is not therefore simply a carefree pastime for ladies of leisure, but the energetic action of someone who intends to take charge of taste and of responsibility of feeding oneself and others. 9. When it comes to great chefs, there is the question of price. As it often argued, agricultural products are underpriced, particularly if we consider the necessary effort required to produce them at the noble ends they serve. A similar reasoning can be made with restaurants. A dinner in a restaurant fine dining tea titles, however much the bill may startle a lot of people, costs significantly less than the latest smartphone or a piece of designer clothing. Why it is all right to pay so much for a pair of sunglasses with a clearly visible logo and not for a food experience comme il faut? When I talk about having been to a Michelin-starred restaurant, people look at me as I were either filthy rich or a crazy prodigal. But if I talk about to trip in Lower Engadine in search of the last people to see Nietzsche walking about the lakeside, then I am considered a shit-low hot intellectual. 10. Finally, a question of education. The number of courses in cookery, food, of cake design, the testing of wine, oils, and all sorts of other things are multiplying. There are master's courses on food, degree courses in gastronomic sciences, full immersion courses with chefs and of all kinds. What about an education of taste in high school? Why it is never discussed unless it is in physiological or health terms? The media discourse about food is now out of fashion, but also before the end of Gastromania, this media discourse has never touched the educational activity in schools which have ignored the anthropological and semiotical question concerning cooking and good food. Let's consider Feuerbach's adage once more. Man is what we eat. It follows that if he eats well, he will be a better man. Let's spread the word. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. It was a really amazing presentation, and on point number 6, I wanted to stand up and applaud.
Number 6.
Yes, on the Assaggini thing.
Okay.
I mean, I so much agreed, and I really thought that the connection with the rest of popular culture and the fragmentation of arts was just really spot on, and so thank you for a wonderful insight. My question about this point is that, do you think there is any connection with the idea of the Assaggini and the fact that more and more people enjoy the fragmentation also as a form of socialization, meaning, for instance, when we watch a movie together, we like to have a lot of things that everybody brings from their place. So there is already this patchwork of food. Do you think there is a connection also with that, in the fact that now Assaggini got institutionalized? Credi che ci sia una connessione tra...
Sì, ho capito.
ok, sorry.
Sì, credo che ci sia una connessione ovviamente, ma il problema è quello che metto lì, questo gioco di parole che ho fatto, pleasure, gastronomics text, in riferimento a Roland Barthes ovviamente. Il problema è che gli Assaggini devono giustificarsi, no? Cioè, a differenza delle pratiche che tu hai evocato, che sono, come dire, assunte, vissute senza nessun particolare problema, non hanno bisogno di giustificare questa, come dire, questa rinuncia alla testualità. Nel caso degli Assaggini invece c'è questa specie di cattiva coscienza, secondo me, e quindi si ricorre appunto a vari quelli che Barthes sempre chiamava delle motivazioni a posteriori del segno, no? E quindi l'idea appunto di mangiare molto, della dieta, della salute, eccetera.
Non esiste in effetti un'identità del culturale del cibo, o se non ho capito male, è un'identità costruita artificialmente per scopi commerciali, di marketing, ma in effetti qualunque tipo di prodotto culinario è frutto di un mix di apporti. Quindi ho letto di recente un libro di un autore francese che sostiene che l'identità culturale non esiste, ma contemporaneamente possiamo dire che la gastronomia, come detto con un bello slogan, è il passaggio dalla natura alla cultura, di vista semiotico, questa apparente contraddizione.
Attributing to Gianfranco the idea that he said that ethnic identity doesn't exist, but it comes from construction. And then he's asking, what's how can we apply this concept of construction to the idea of gastronomy? If gastronomy is something that turns things from nature to culture, how can we how can it work, and then how can we describe this kind of transformation in a semiotic way?
Culturale, gastronomica è il risultato di una costruzione. Non significa dire che è artificiale, dunque falsa.
L'identità gastronomica è frutto dell'industria. L'industria mima quello che si è sempre fatto nelle culture, con i suoi scopi, con i suoi obiettivi di tipo economico naturalmente. Ripeto, l'identità culturale è evidentemente costruita. Questo per noi è un punto di partenza, non un punto di arrivo. Il problema è vedere come.
By saying that the cultural identity comes from a construction, you don't say that it's something that is false, but on the contrary, every culture has a side of construction that semiotics wants to reveal, and then what marketers or food industries makes to food that constructs identities is something that our cultures have been always doing. And then there is nothing strange, but what Gianfranco wants to remark is that this process is not natural, it comes from culture, and then revealing this idea of identities that are being constructed is something that helps to have a critical approach.
Interesting construction, because if we see our Western world, we made available. If we see the other part of the world, we would immediately notice that food is actually not free and it's not available. Clean eating, the food is clean, and then maybe you would come to this discussion between what is clean and what is dirty, and there is where the cultures in the beginning are bordering themselves.
Right. And the problem, the problem, because before they are here, and so this is a reaction, okay? Search of natural here, and the ethnic tradition here, okay? So we have four positions that we organize the universe of semiotic sense of it.
The construction of the life with this occupied term, for me, is a little bit, how to say, scandalous.
Of the discourse about organic, biological, and so on. We work a lot in Palermo about this problem. I think that the opposition, not me, in general, a lot of people think that the opposition between nature and culture is a cultural opposition. So the nature is a construction, a discursive construction into different cultures. The answer of Claude Lévi-Strauss, the anthropologist, he said that nature is something less elaborated and culture is something more elaborated. So I think it's a good idea to understand the mechanism of construction of the effects of nature or the effects of stones. It's